The Iron Game Chalk Talk podcast is brought to you by the following sponsors: EliteForm.com, IgnitionAPG.com, PlayUSA at PLAEUSA.com, and Sorinex Exercise Equipment at Sorinex.com. And now, the Iron Game Chalk Talk podcast. Welcome to Iron Game Chalk Talk with your host, Ron McKeefery.
Every time our athletes walk into this weight room, they're going to be pushed to the max.
Let's go! Everything you got!
On this podcast, hear Coach McKeefery's straight talk about training, featuring the top strength and conditioning professionals from around the world. And now, here's your host, Ron McKeefery.
Hey guys, welcome back to Our Game Chalk Talk. I'm your host, Ron McKeefery, and this is episode number 155. Excited to have Dave Schmitz with us today. Dave is the band man. He's the founder of ResistanceBandTraining.com, and got a chance to follow him, watch him speak. We've spoken at a couple of conferences together, and just see him in action. And if you haven't watched an episode or a lecture, or have got a chance to know him, he is full of energy. A great guy, charismatic, and obviously has a huge passion for resistance band training. So I wanted to have him on the show. I wanted to talk a little bit about why resistance band, why there's such an importance using resistance bands in training, the different types of manufacturing processes, and how to differentiate yourself or differentiate bands from one another when you're purchasing them for your facility. And then just, the ways that people have used them, how to choose the sizes, all those types of things. And so I found this very, very informative. I did not know most of the background behind the manufacturing processes and really choosing the size of band and those types of things. So I know you're going to get a ton out of it. I did. Before we do, we want to make sure we recognize our sponsor for the show, Ignition APG. Just got back not too long ago from speaking at their speed certification, their annual speed certification in Cincinnati, and fantastic event, great people, there to speak. I think the content is fantastic, and anytime that you can get advanced training in a specific aspect of strength and conditioning like speed, I think it always helps differentiate yourself, separate yourself from the pack. Especially as a young coach, you need to find ways to have a unique selling proposition to staffs, to employers, to kind of separate yourself out from the 500 plus resumes that you get as an employer. So I would encourage you to check out their speed certification. They got a ton of other great products and doing some big things in the performance space. And so check out Ignition APG, follow them on Facebook and Twitter, and be inspired by the things that they're doing, not just in the weight room and things along those lines, but out in their community and really taking that mind, body, spirit approach to how they reach their athletes. And so think the world of them. Check them out. Sit back, enjoy this episode, and I'll see you on the other side. All right, guys, welcome back to Iron Game Chalk Talk. Excited to have Dave Schmitz with us. Dave is the band man, the guy that I've got a chance to hear speak a couple times. At the IGCT conference, he came in when at the Bengals. It was before my time there, but I got a chance to see his presentation from video, and the guy's a wealth of information, a great resource, and excited to have you on the show, man.
Well, thanks a lot, Ron. I appreciate it. I don't get always an opportunity to talk to just strength coaches by themselves, so this is going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Well, Dave, for those coaches that aren't as familiar with you, go into your journey a little bit, kind of how you got into strength and conditioning and kind of evolved to what you're currently doing with ResistanceBandTraining.com.
Yeah, well, as my profession is a physical therapist. So I started as a physical therapist and rehabilitating simply orthopedic-related injuries. So rotator cuff, low back, ACLs, those types of things. That was kind of my niche in physical therapy. And the one thing I struggled with was the transition of athletes specifically from the rehab clinic back into sport. And not to belabor that, but there just wasn't a good program to transition athletes. In most cases, they left our clinic and they were on their own. And so what I did was I started creating a program outside of rehab that was kind of a performance-based program for injured athletes coming back into sport. And the thing I needed a tool that allowed them to develop the key things that caused their injury. And the number one thing was deceleration control. And so elastic resistance was the best option. And so I could teach them how to learn how to decelerate and put them slowly back into sport. And I knew they were ready. Now, that doesn't mean we didn't strength train and all that. I'm not saying that. But the number one thing, the key thing that athletes couldn't do post-injury was stop.
Right.
And they couldn't stop in multiple directions. So that evolved us into resistance bands. I found the continuous loop bands work the best. And fast forwarding, 20 years, essentially what I said was, as we moved along, the program took off. And I said, well, let's take this to the masses and let's start teaching athletes how to train with bands before they get injured. Makes sense. So we started basically a performance-based program for athletes using bands. I started it locally, and then I started getting out and talking to coaches. Eventually, I started doing high school clinics where we would train 100 athletes at a time in bands. The coaches would then incorporate it into their high school programs. And it took off, and then we went online and kept going with it. Outside of that, when you go to resistancebandtraining.com, you'll see a fitness component to it as well. Well, there's a fitness component because I also believe that besides training athletes like athletes, I like to train adults like athletes. And I say that in a very safe manner because I think we all have athletic endeavors. I think we all have athleticism inside us.
Sure.
The key is to make sure that we train it at the progression level that they can handle. And so when you come to resistancebandtraining.com, you'll see a fitness component and you'll see a performance component, both available to you. And just so when coaches come, I know your group is a lot of strength coaches, and they come to the site and they say, well, wait, this is fitness. No. Dig in a little deeper. There's a section for coaches, and that's where I need you to go and check things out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've been there, and like I said, they brought you into the Bengals, and you go consult with many teams. And so there's tons of great resources there. I think when you were coming up with those progressions, I would imagine that you made many mistakes, and modified as you go, and you probably still continually do so. What's maybe the biggest mistake that you've made in coaching and kind of how you learned from it?
Biggest mistake easily is thinking you have to use huge bands to get results. When I first learned bands, I went into a place and watched this guy train with them, and he was using what is approximately 150 to 200 pound band to train middle school athletes. Now think about that. Most of these middle school athletes were probably
not even 150 pounds.
Yeah, 100 pounds, maybe 100 pounds. Can you imagine the forces they had to overcome to train these bands? And I watched and I thought, the concept made sense, but why are we training them at such a high level? And so the biggest mistake coaches make is they use too strong of a band, which causes inhibition, which shuts down things, and as a result, they don't get results.
Right.
So I'll take that just one step further then. So they go to smaller bands. They understand the concept, but now they don't monitor the training session, and athletes are aggressive. They want to compete. And so what happens is they start training in these bands, and the competition and the aggressiveness starts coming up.
Right.
And all of a sudden, they're looking for more resistance. Well, with bands, it's so easy to increase resistance because all you got to do is stretch it further. Mm-hmm. So now all of a sudden you get these competitive athletes working in these smaller bands. They're flying around. They're doing great. They're looking for more, and the coach doesn't monitor it. And all of a sudden you have an athlete stretching bands about 6, 7, 8 yards, and bands start to break.
Right.
That's the drawback if you don't monitor. But if you monitor correctly and you work with smaller bands, you're going to get awesome results.
Yeah, I think it brings up lots of questions. And, as strength coaches, I don't think there's probably a strength coach that's listening that doesn't have some form of bands in their weight room right now. The problem I have when trying to, we've done this, even as recently as a month ago, where we're researching, and maybe we bought bands from Elite Fitness, and then all of a sudden now, a couple bands break and we can get a little bit better deal at Rogue, or we can get a little bit better deal at resistancebandtraining.com or wherever. What's the strength coach? What's the buyer's guide? I mean, what do you need to know and what should be in your weight room?
Oh man, that's an awesome question. Let me take you through what a good band should look like. First of all, we're going to talk flat, continuous looped bands. We're not going to talk tubular bands. Reason is, tubular bands are hollow and they're molded, which means that their level of tolerance or their stretchability or their stretch tolerance is going to be significantly less than a flat, continuous loop band. Because a flat, continuous loop band is a solid thickness of elastic.
Right.
So we're going to go flat bands first. So if you're going to invest in elastic resistance, go flat bands. So now we're at flat bands. Now the next step is there's two types of flat bands. There's molded flat bands. Now molded is exactly what it is. They take liquid latex, they dump it into a mold, it hardens, they pull it out, you're good to go.
Right.
Very simple concept, very simple manufacturing process. The problem with it is this. The chemical makeup of that liquid latex can become inconsistent. And so what happens is when that hardens, you can have a higher level of chemical makeup in certain parts of the band, which creates tension points. So as you're training with this band and you go to push it or train with it, all of a sudden it goes from 60 pounds, boom, up to 100 pounds, just because of that increased tension. Now you can imagine if there's increased tension at one point in the band, well, that's going to cause that band to have high level of tension at that point, which means it potentially can break very easily because there's so much tension at one point. The other option for flat bands is layered flat bands. Layered flat bands are constructed by taking the band and gradually forming layers. So they take a big spool. If you can imagine a spool that's about 2 feet in diameter, they start wrapping layered latex around it. And every time they layer it, they go ahead and keep adding a layer. Once they've created a 15 level or 15 layer band, they go ahead and cut the end of it, seal it down, and now you have a layered band. And then, so now, why is a layered important? Well, the layers bond together. So now it's like stretching a band that has multiple layers working together that create almost like a matrix effect. Much more durable. Matter of fact, probably 300 times durable than a molded band. And because it's layered, you get a consistent stretch all the way around the band, so there's no tension points.
Sure.
The final thing that we do at resistancebandtraining.com is we do two things to make that layering process even better. Number one, we use latex bonding, which means that every time a layer gets laid down, it gets glued and heated. So as it's continually layered, it gets glued and heated. Now, why is that important? Well, take like 3 or 4 patches that you're going to iron onto your piece of clothing you have on.
Right.
Okay, you take one patch, you put it on, you iron it on, it sticks well. Now, let's take 5 patches, put it over top of each other, and then iron the top one.
Right.
The middle 2 may not stick. And so as a result that you don't get a good bonding, latex bonding seals each layer firmly together. And then the final thing we do, which is an extra step that most layer bands don't do, is we do what's called a latex weld, where we take the final layer. Most companies will just clip it off, glue it down, and say you're done. We actually weld it back onto the band so it can't peel off. And if you've worked with layered bands in the past that didn't have welding, that top layer can peel off. And it's not going to weaken the band, it just looks bad.
Right.
And you got to continually clip that thing off.
Right.
I didn't like that. So I went back to our manufacturer and said, hey, we're going to go ahead and weld this thing down and eliminate it. And they said, we can do that. So that's the difference. Tubular, flat band, go flat. Flat, you want to go layered versus molded.
Sure.
And if you can, go to layered layered with the latex weld to eliminate any issues. Now you have a band that's really going to hold up well.
Yeah, man, that's great. That's very informative. What about, now tensions? I mean, different, widths of those bands.
Yeah. The tension is all created by two things. Number one, the thickness of the band. The standard thickness of most bands is 4.5 millimeters. Ours are 5 millimeters. We beef it up and add one additional layer onto it to make it 5 millimeters just because it creates a better durable band. But otherwise, so the thickness is going to create tension, the tension level, and then the width of the band. And the width of the band is going to vary typically anywhere from 1/2 inch. It's going to go up to 3/4 inch. Then it's going to go to 1 1/8 inch, and then up to 1 3/4 inch, and so on up there. So that width of the band is what creates the tension and the resistance. What a lot of people don't understand is this about the tension, and I'll just kind of get into this a second. When you work with elastic resistance, you're looking for the effect, the training effect. In the powerlifting community, they're very much into numbers.
Right.
They know exactly what the strength level is when I get to the top of that bench press or the top of that squat.
Agreed.
And I get that. But for the general strength coach that wants to use elastic resistance to get a training effect to their athletes, you're going to want to work with a band that has about a 30 to 40 pound resistance variability. So every band that we have has approximately a 30 pound variability, meaning it can train anywhere. For instance, if we go with our large purple band, that thing's going to create a 50 pound resistance and probably vary up to almost 80 pounds, 85 pounds resistance.
Are you saying when it's fully extended, it would be 80 pounds?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly. So if you're training and you ask me, well, Dave, how much resistance is this band? I'll say, well, how far are you stretching it?
Right.
And so if you're into numbers, elastic resistance can be a little bit of a struggle. But if you're into a phenomenal training effect that elastic resistance can bring, you're good to go. Just make sure you got the right type of band that fits your aggressive level of training.
So if you're buying bands and you need to have kind of a balance, I mean, we'll get into the different types of training that you would do it in here in a second. But if you're trying to buy balanced, would you get a 1/2 inch and an 1 1/8 and maybe a 2 inch to kind of have a good spectrum, or what would your recommendations be?
Well, I'll ask you this, Ron. Would you buy one dumbbell to train everything?
Sure. Yeah, no, obviously not.
You wouldn't do it. So to answer your question, yes, you want to get a variety of bands of different levels because you're going to use different resistances to train different types of movements. So that makes common sense. Where I think bands start developing this problem is people thinking that they can use one band to train everything because we'll just stretch it further and we'll keep stretching it. And so it doesn't work that way. It's not a dumbbell, so eventually it can be overstretched. And so as a strength coach, to provide your athletes with the optimal type of training experience with elastic resistance, you're going to probably need about 3 levels of resistance. Because with that 3 levels, you're going to probably be able to achieve approximately 100-pound resistance variability, which is quite a bit. Right. You think about it. Think about how many dumbbells you have to buy to create 100 pounds of resistance variability. Mm-hmm. I'm going to say buy 3 bands and you've got that accomplished.
Right. And so what would those 3 sizes be that you would recommend?
Again, are we going to talk high school athletes? If you're talking high school athletes.
Let's talk college and pro.
College and pro, you're going to probably go with our 1 inch and 1/8 purple band, and you're going to probably progress all the way up to our blue extra large band. So the 1 1/8 all the way up to our 3 inch band, and I'm talking widths. And that's probably what you're going to use. For speed development with our college athletes, we use our green extra large and our blue double extra large. They fit great with the high school or college athletes. We link them together, so you need 2 bands linked together, and you're great. And you can do a lot of first step speed training.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. You talk a little bit about first step speed, but you got I mean, the spectrum's endless in terms of all the different types of ways that you can use a band. But I mean, flexibility, resistance training, speed development. I mean, what are some ways? What are some things that strength coaches maybe aren't thinking about that, or ways that you can use a band? I mean, you walk in, it's like, man, did you ever think about doing this?
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what. Here's the thing that I discovered, like early on in training, that nobody does. Nobody goes ahead and teaches athletes how to stop. Mm-hmm. And I know that you say, well, yeah, we do these drills where we teach them how to stick, jump and stick. Well, let me take it one step further. Do you teach your athletes how to stop against a momentum that's faster than what their body by itself can create? Probably not.
Right.
But think about it. If I got my body to learn how to stop under maybe a 30, 40-pound momentum resistance, do you think it could stop better when the resistance is taken away? Absolutely. So you've heard of overspeed training, to help acceleration and speed. A lot of coaches don't look at bands as a way of training what we call accelerated eccentrics or accelerated deceleration. Mm-hmm. And so if you take those two terms and you think about them, accelerated deceleration, essentially what I'm doing is I'm teaching athletes how to stop under an accelerated momentum that will teach their nervous system, their timing, their body position and posture, how to react quicker. So now in a game situation, they're always under balance. They always have the base of support, the core stability, and the body posture where it needs to be. And if they don't, we've built in a little bit of a margin of error because we've taught the neuromuscular system how to react quicker.
Right.
And so they can get out of trouble. And that, if your coaches can grasp that, which I think a lot of them can, man, that's huge. Now the next question is, how do we do that, Dave? Very simple. You take the basic movements of locomotion, shuffle, forward run, back pedal, turn and go, and you make them work it backwards.
Yeah.
So instead of shuffling out away from the band attachment, you're going to shuffle towards the band attachment when it's under load and see if you can get off that point and get back up.
Yeah.
Makes sense?
Yeah.
That's huge. You do that with your kids. And the cool thing is we've seen it transfer into the weight room because now when they go into their squat, they go into their bench, they go into their power, their big Olympic movements, their stabilization is so good that when they go into load, they're able to accelerate the weight even more aggressively. Mm. And I think guys like Louis Simmons they're the pioneers of it. I mean, they've been doing stuff with this. I just think I've been able to put it into a common sense, easy, understandable approach for coaches to use, and then giving them 3 or 4 or 5 exercises and a program to follow that makes it very simple for them. So they don't have to be a physiologist or anything. They just understand, hey, we're trying to get people to stop better. Here's the exercises. Here's the progression, how to do it.
Absolutely. Well, there's a good friend of mine, Robert Dos Remedios, that always talks about being obsessed with the breaks, and I couldn't agree with you more. And that's a fantastic use of it as well. What would you tell the typical strength coach in terms of, programming? Obviously there's some challenges with determining a resistance or determining, how do you best, when you're designing your programs, determine volume and load?
Yeah. I want my athletes to be fast. I want them to be quick. In order to do that, I've got to keep their central nervous system fresh. Mm-hmm. And so if my goal is to develop explosiveness, quickness, I'm going to make sure my volume is such that I keep a fresh central nervous system. So if you're going to ask me, hey Dave, we're going to go through, I'm going to put a bunch of high school girls tonight through a basketball workout with bands. We're going to work sets of 3, sets of 4, and we're going to repeat the exercise maybe 3 to 4 times. So we're going to do about 12 reps, and then we're going to go to a new variation of the exercise. Mm-hmm. And we're going to keep the sets at 3 to 5 reps so that their nervous system stays fresh. And I'll even take it one step further and say, okay, Do we want to work deceleration or do we want to work acceleration? If we're working acceleration, I will take a simple 3-step shuffle and have them focus on getting out. Just get out. Stop, walk it back, reset, get out. Or if we're working deceleration, I'll preload the band.
Right.
And I'll say, okay, guys, I need you to focus. How quick can you get back to the attachment and back out one time, reload? So I think, again, from a progression standpoint, what are you after? Are you after speed and quickness? Then you're going to have to decrease the volume so they can get after it. If you're interested in metabolic conditioning, all right, then we're going to start going to 20 and 30-second sets. Mm-hmm. And we're going to work metabolic conditioning, which is what you'll see me doing more of about 3 weeks out from football practice. I'm going to start bringing their metabolic conditioning up because their timing, their movements are great, okay? And I know they know the exercises, so now I'm going to challenge their metabolic system to see if they can work under fatigue, and we're going to go with some metabolic training. So which one you going to work? You know, you tell me, and then I'll give you the volume. But hopefully that gives them some general guidelines.
Yeah, it's obviously a wide spectrum as well, but I appreciate that. Well, Dave, I know you're a busy man. We end the show with some resources here. Give us the best piece of coaching advice you ever received.
One of the best books I've ever received from a coach is called I Believe. And it's from an old football coach that unfortunately is no longer with us, but it's called I Believe in Ice Cream, Apples, and Football. And it's the author is Coach Larry Beckish. It's Beckish. It's a leadership book is what it is, but it's all about how to go ahead and lead young athletes.
Yeah.
It's a great book. So pick it up because it's probably it should be the guide for a lot of coaches as far as leadership is concerned.
Oh, that's a great book. What about a piece of an actual advice that a coach has given you, or you've just kind of gotten in your coaching career?
You know, I started working at our local high school weight room about 8 years ago. And when I went in there, man, I was, pretty hell-bent on making sure I was going to get our athletes disciplined and get after it. And I took an approach of in their face a lot. And I think the biggest thing I've learned is that I think it's better to come from a standpoint of encouraging and not get in their face right away, but let them see that encouragement is the first and foremost thing that I want them to see from me. And then, if discipline becomes an action, the next step is to look them in the eye and say, okay, is that what we're going to do or not? And if that doesn't work, then I'm going to get in your face.
Sure.
So I think a lot of coaches come at it hard and in their face to gain respect. I think you can gain a lot more respect from encouragement and then bring the other face around at the end if you're not getting the response you want.
Absolutely. Well, we'll make sure we link up resistancebandtraining.com as a website, but is there any other websites that you regularly check out and any apps that you use for your own productivity or from a strength training standpoint?
I use I use Seconds Pro. It's an app that I use for interval training that our athletes love. It makes it so easy for me to program in the workout. It's audibleized. You can hook your own music to it, and it allows me to work with athletes and not have to worry about look at a clock or have to watch a timer. And I think that's important. I think when you can automate a workout and let the athletes know that, hey, you are present and working with them and you're not looking at a timer all the time, I think that's huge. And so I would say Seconds Pro. I follow Dose a little bit. You recommended Dose earlier. Dose and I go back a ways in resistance band training. I put him through a workout once that he'll talk to you about someday. But I like following Dose. And I like following, strength coaches that are out there, like, people that I'm sure you follow as well. So that from a website standpoint, I don't have one particular one that jumps out at me right now.
Wow, that's great. What about, coaches that come to your site? What would be the best resource for them to check out?
Coaches when you say resource, are you talking about training resource or a training package?
Both.
Both. From a training resource, I think the number one resource that I could offer coaches is about 2 years ago, I do a high school workshop where we bring athletes in, coaches come in, they bring their athletes in, and I train them on first step speed and weight room resistance band strengthening. And we videotape the whole thing. It's a coach's workshop. I think that would be a great resource, a resource only for coaches to get their hands on. It's 8 hours of resistance band training in a high school environment. I think that'd be very helpful. From a band package standpoint, if you want to go ahead and you want to train athletes, I think either our Youth A or our Youth B speed development program or speed package would be a great place to start, because the Youth A is going to be for more middle school, early high school. Sure. The Youth B is going to be for high school and college level athletes, and it's they're youth speed development packages. And I think either one of those, just depending on who you work with, would be a great package. That comes with our Accelerating to the Ball, our Quick Kids program, and the speed programs that they need to have to teach their kids how to get going. So I think those two packages would be great, or that resource would be great.
Oh, that's fantastic. Well, Dave, man, this has been very, very informative. I've taken multiple pages of notes here, and I truly appreciate you coming on and spending time and sharing with everybody. So open and so much information. We'll make sure to link everything up for your site, but
thank you.
Really appreciate you spending the time.
Very good. Well, thank you for having me, Ron. It's been fun. Like I said, I don't get to talk to coaches at all a lot, so I'm excited. And, man, have your coaches learn. They can email me anytime. I'm one of those guys that I may run an online business and all that, but I answer my own emails. And so if they're interested in communicating with me, I'd love to talk to them about it and help them set it up if they're interested.
That's great, man. Thanks so much.
You're welcome, Ron. Thank you.
That's it for this episode of Iron Game Chalk Talk. Thanks to this week's guest as well as our sponsors for bringing this episode to you for free. Make sure to check out ronmckeefery.com, where you can join our mailing list, find the show notes, including all the links and resources mentioned, and information about Coach McKeefery's other products. While you are there, please join Coach McKeefery in the comments section thanking our guest for sharing. If you haven't subscribed to Iron Game Chalk Talk on YouTube or iTunes yet, make sure to do so. Comments, ratings, and reviews are always welcome. Coach McKeefery can be found on Twitter at @RMcKeefery, on Facebook and YouTube at /Ron.McKeefery. That's it for this week. Be sure to check back next week for another great episode of Iron Game Chalk Talk.